The movie opens on October 13th, 1972, when a Uruguayan rugby team known as the Old Christians Club takes a plane to fly to Chile for a special match. Most of them have never left the country, so this is very exciting, and some family members come along for support. As they start approaching the Andes Mountains that separate Chile and Argentina, the plane shakes a couple of times. A passenger explains that the warm winds from Argentina collide with the cold mountain air, creating a suction effect that causes slight turbulence. However, as the plane continues, the turbulence worsens, and suddenly the plane sinks a few miles. The pilots struggle to keep the plane going through the stormy winds while everyone holds tight and watches their belongings fall in the corridor. For a moment, they catch a glimpse of the sun, only for the plane to descend once again and collide with the mountain, breaking in half. One of the players is blown away with the tail of the plane, while the front continues until it crashes into the snow, resulting in multiple people being killed in various gruesome ways. One by one, the survivors try to overcome the shock and leave their seats to help the trapped passengers. Blood is everywhere, and two medical students try to assist those with broken limbs and help them calm down. Some individuals check on the pilot, but he dies after uttering only a few words, and the radio isn't working. Others attempt to scream for help to no avail. The temperature rapidly drops, especially as night falls, so the survivors huddle together inside the plane, using bodies and bags to cover any holes. Many of them can't stop panicking or crying, so they do their best to comfort one another. In the morning, they discover that a few more people have frozen to death. The storm has passed, and the sun is shining brightly, but all they see around them are snow and mountains stretching for miles. The group decides they must take action to survive. They remove the seats and debris from the plane to create space for everyone to sleep at night. The wounded survivors are moved to spots where they can receive the most sunlight, prioritizing their care. Any useful objects they find are stored in suitcases for protection, and all bags and suitcases are thoroughly searched for food. The bodies are moved away from the plane and kept together nearby, covered in snow to prevent them from decomposing in the hope of taking them with them when help arrives. On the first day, they already have 11 deceased people, in addition to the one individual who was blown away. Once they are organized, they have a small snack, being careful to ration their food to make it last. Suddenly, they hear a plane flying by, so they attempt to yell and wave their arms, but they are not spotted. On the second night, they prepare to sleep inside the plane, using the clothes from the bags as blankets and covering the hole with the suitcases. On the third day, Nando finally wakes up. He has been unconscious since the crash, so they have to explain what happened. His body is in terrible condition, but he manages to drag himself on the ground to be with his sister, who is also not doing well. When Nando asks about their mom, they have to inform him that she died, which makes him think about his father alone back in Uruguay. Afterwards, they use some metal to melt snow for water. They also create a huge X on the ground with suitcases, hoping to attract attention. When another plane flies by, they try to reflect the sun on mirrors and continue yelling. Someone notices the plane's wings rocking, which may be a sign that they were seen. The next day, they hear the plane again, but it is far away, indicating that the search is being conducted in a different area and they were not spotted. The group starts discussing survival options and remembers that there were some batteries in the tail, so they decide to venture out and find it. They fashion goggles using mirrors and leather from the seats, and 4 survivors begin climbing the mountain to locate the tail. After ascending a few miles, they realize that the crash site cannot be seen from afar due to the heavy snow. This means that the chances of a rescue plane finding them are almost zero. At that moment, they notice snow falling, so the 4 individuals decide to return to the crash site for the time being. Days start to pass, and after a week, they run out of food. There are no animals or plants in the area, and they attempt to eat some moss from a rock, but it tastes absolutely disgusting. Nando mentions that he would eat the bodies if necessary, which sparks an argument over whether they should consume the flesh of the deceased passengers. Some survivors mention that their urine is black, while others express fear of going to jail for it, but they fail to reach an agreement. As time goes on, they become increasingly desperate for food and start eating anything they can find, such as shoelaces and cigarettes. This only causes their urine to darken further. On the 8th day, Nando's sister passes away, and Coco decides to write a letter to his parents, describing the tragedy, but also the beauty of the place. A few more storms hit them in the following days, and they manage to survive by hiding inside the plane. However, on day 21, half of the group gets tired of the situation and makes an announcement. They give their permission for the others to eat their bodies if they die. Then they go outside and, using a piece of glass, they extract meat from the bodies to feed themselves. Witnessing this, a few people change their minds and join the group outside to finally eat as well, leaving only 5 people who refuse to become cannibals. The next day, they establish a proper system to hide most of the bodies while they do the job, making it less gruesome for those who aren't involved in chopping and sparing them from witnessing it. They also start leaving some meat pieces under the sun to warm them up. Sometime later, they discover a new suitcase buried in the snow and are surprised to find a radio inside. After constructing a makeshift antenna, they manage to turn it on, only to learn from the news that the government has decided not to search for them anymore after 66 search missions. The entire group experiences a breakdown as they lose all hope, and 4 people give in and consume human meat. Afterward, 3 individuals decide to venture out and search for the plane tail properly this time. The first thing they encounter is a lot of debris and 5 bodies, including the man who had been sucked out of the plane during the fall. They continue to move as quickly as possible, despite the challenges of slipping while climbing and freezing winds that make breathing difficult. At night, they huddle against the side of the mountain, trying to sleep amidst a raging storm. They wake up covered in snow but alive, although one of them is blind and the other 2 are very weak. They decide to return by sliding down on a piece of debris. After such a traumatic experience, the last remaining person agrees to eat human meat as well and goes to sleep in tears. On the 17th day, the group has been enduring a storm for 5 days. They stay inside the plane and try to uplift the mood by telling stories, but suddenly, an avalanche descends, burying the plane and filling it with snow. As the few people who manage to stay on top panic, one of them ventures outside, only to realize that the storm has worsened. They frantically begin digging in the snow to rescue all the passengers who were buried, even resorting to urinating on the snow to accelerate the melting process. After a tremendous amount of work, effort, and screaming, they succeed in rescuing everyone except for a woman who was deeply buried and died quickly. At that moment, they hear a strange noise and discover another avalanche approaching, which once again buries them and claims the lives of a few more men, including the team captain. The survivors hastily create a few holes to breathe through, but as they wait, they can only pray while they hear the sounds of falling snow. When they regain some energy, they gather 8 bodies in a corner. On the 18th day, having been buried for 2 days, the hunger becomes increasingly agonizing. They have no choice but to start consuming meat from the bodies, but this time, it's much more challenging because they can't hide most of the bodies in the snow to avoid seeing their faces. It means they know exactly whose flesh they are eating. This angers Numa so much that he begins digging and breaking the windows, resulting in a cut on his leg from the broken glass. However, this doesn't deter him, and he continues to dig. On day 20, he finally succeeds in creating a hole in the snow large enough for the remaining survivors to emerge. After taking a moment to relax and appreciate the fact that they are still alive, the group starts working on excavating the plane. Numa discovers a cut on his foot that he hadn't felt due to the cold, but he disregards it and continues to help. Eventually, the sunny days assist them in freeing the plane, and they even contemplate sending a few men out on another search mission. However, they still lack the means to survive the freezing nights outside. In the end, they agree to wait a few more days since summer is approaching. On day 34, the thaw finally begins. The 2 injured men from the beginning are extremely ill, and the medical students realize that there is nothing more they can do for them. Within a few hours, they discover that Coco's lungs are filled with fluid, and despite their attempts at CPR, he succumbs to his condition and passes away. When they retrieve his body, they find his letter and keep it safe. On day 36, the weather has improved enough for Roberto, Nando, Tintin, and Numa to embark on a new search expedition, wearing additional layers of clothing to withstand the cold nights. However, Numa starts feeling dizzy and collapses. Upon examining his foot, they discover that his wound is infected. The group considers taking him back, but Numa insists that he is strong enough to return alone and urges them to continue. As soon as Numa arrives at the crash site, he loses consciousness. A few hours later, he regains consciousness only to witness the other sick passenger hallucinating before succumbing to death. The following morning, the group begins working on removing the ice from the cockpit as a precaution. Numa desires to contribute, but his weakness prevents him from doing so, leaving him feeling useless and frustrated. Eventually, the trio returns with significant news. They have found the tail of the plane. Through a series of short trips with the others, they retrieve clean coats, bottles of rum, cigarettes, and even chocolate. They also discover the plane's batteries and attempt to connect them to the cockpit in order to power the radio. After extensive effort, they manage to generate some static, but they receive no response. Days continue to pass, and the group hesitates to venture outside because even with the additional coats, spending a night in the harsh conditions almost cost them their lives. Numa's infection worsens, spreading throughout his body. The food they found in the tail is still insufficient, so they resort to stripping the remaining meat from the bones. At this point, it has become a routine for them, and they are no longer bothered by it. Knowing that his time is running out, Numa stops eating so that the others can have more food. They make another attempt to fix the radio, but the wires cause a small short circuit, leading them to give up on the idea. Out of frustration, they write a message on the plane counting the number of survivors. During another trip to the tail, the group is pleasantly surprised to discover some waterproof fabric that was covering the pipes. They bring it back and start assembling a sleeping bag, which will provide them with some insulation during the freezing nights outside. The smaller radio still works, and they hear on the news that, despite 58 days passing since the crash, the Air Force is planning to send another aircraft to search for them. An argument arises among the group about how to proceed. Some argue that they should wait for the aircraft, while others believe they should take matters into their own hands and search for help since they have not seen any rescue teams in the area. Frustrated, Roberto tears apart the sleeping bag. Eventually, they decide to distract themselves by imitating bird noises as they see birds flying by. They also find a camera and take several pictures. That night, Numa gives them permission to consume his body, and by morning, they discover that he has passed away. In his hands, they find a note that says, "There's no greater love than to give one's life for friends." Inspired by these words, Roberto, Nando, and Tintin make the decision to go out once again. Equipped with the new sleeping bag and a significant amount of meat, they start their journey west with the goal of crossing the mountain to reach Chile. The weather becomes extremely windy at night, prompting them to dig a hole in the snow and huddle inside the sleeping bag, which helps them survive until morning. When they finally reach the top of a tall mountain, they are devastated to discover that there is still a considerable distance to cover. They briefly consider giving up due to the lack of food for such a long trip. Tintin volunteers to go back, ensuring that the remaining food will be enough for Roberto and Nando. The journey is arduous and lengthy, but after a lot of walking, the duo finally descends into a valley where the ground is more rocky than snowy. When Nando's shoe breaks, Roberto improvises by tying some fabric around it, allowing them to continue. One evening after dinner, Roberto vomits, but Nando comforts him, and they resume their journey in the morning. Their efforts pay off when they stumble upon a river with fresh water and even a small lizard. At that moment, they look up and are shocked to see a man on a horse staring at them from the other side of the river. The noise of the water prevents clear communication, but after seeing Roberto and Nando scream and wave their arms, the man throws some paper and a pencil towards them. The duo explains who they are, and the man takes the paper back to make some calls. Soon, the message reaches the Air Rescue Service, and a new mission is planned. The man returns for Roberto and Nando, taking them to his cabin where they can finally have proper food. Within a few hours, the area is surrounded by reporters who eagerly ask them questions. News of their rescue spreads, and the group at the crash site is ecstatic to learn that help is on the way. They wash up and gather their belongings, including pieces of the plane as mementos, in bags. When the helicopters finally arrive, Roberto and Nando are taken on board to act as guides. On the 71st day, the entire group is finally rescued, and tears of joy flow as soon as they see the helicopters. The entire rescue is recorded, including the group's insistence on bringing their bags despite the lack of space. In total, 16 people have survived. Upon reaching the city, their families are already waiting to welcome them back. They are then taken to the hospital, where a large crowd is gathered to celebrate their return and call them heroes. The doctors conduct thorough tests to assess their health, especially considering their emaciated state. Since they can barely move, they assist each other in taking showers, and their families take charge of their grooming. Each survivor is provided with their own bed, but that night they choose to huddle together as a group, still dealing with the aftermath of their harrowing experience. Thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content like this.